Good afternoon, and welcome to K2's Road to Excellence Part 5 and our partner Adagio by SoftTrack. This is Alan Salmon, and I hope this is our final winter session because it's certainly cold and there's a lot of snow on the ground in Brampton. Nancy and I are really looking forward to spring. But on with the business of today. As usual, I have a little bit of admin stuff to go over. My good friend Marilyn Benninger is backing me up today, and she is your go-to person for technical issues and for questions. Your microphones are muted for obvious reasons. You're welcome to take notes, but be aware that within 10 days of today, Marilyn will be sending you a package, and in that package will be the recording of the webinar, my extensive teaching notes, my teaching files, and the answers to all of the questions that you pose in the chat window. So feel free at any time to ask either Andrew Bates or myself a question in the chat window. After today's webinar is finished, Marilyn will take all of the questions, split them up, and send them to Andrew and myself. We will send her back the answers, and you will get all the questions and answers in your package. And finally, we come to, for most of you, the most important part of today, and that is your Cpe Certificate. 4 times today, Marilyn is going to be stopping either Andrew or myself and put up a polling question. If you're new to the webinar, polling questions are multiple choice, usually 4 possible answers, and you don't have to get it right. What you do have to do is select one of the options and click on Submit, because that timestamps your file, and we know that at that point in time, you are with us on the webinar. And if you're recorded as answering at least three of the 4 questions, you will get a certificate for 1 CPD hour. If not, you'll get 1 non-verifiable one. So Marilyn, it's time we got started today. And this is the second of what I'm calling my Excel Guru sessions. And what's special about these is that I'm picking a number of Excel tools or functions that I think you'll be interested in. So Marilyn, let's see what's happening with our audience. So can we do the first poll, please?
Absolutely. Good morning or good afternoon, folks, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be launching our first poll, which means your screen should turn blue and you have a question. There will be 5 questions today. In order to earn a verified credit, we need to see you answer 4 or 5, and you'll receive your credit within 10 days along with your recording. So we're asking if you've ever worked with any of the tools you see there: Inquire, EO month, substitute, forecast sheets, or maybe none of the above. And you're going to learn lots today with Alan. We keep our polls open till right now, and we're at 90%. So I'm going to be counting you down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to be closing the poll, and I'm sharing the results with you.
Those are impressive low numbers, but impressive that 4% have used Inquire. So without further ado, let me have the comm again, Marilyn. Let's deal with Inquire. Now, you will remember if you were on the Excel Guru part 1 that I did, I started to move into some topics that are unique to Excel 2013 and 2016. I'm only going to do one of those today. I might do a bonus depending on my time. And the one that I'm going to do is Inquire. That came in 2013. So the first thing you need to look at is you'll notice up in my tab group that I have an Enquirer tab. Now, how did I get that? Well, I went to File, Options, Add-ins, not Excel add-ins, but COM add-ins. And I went Go. And you'll notice Inquire is there, so as soon as I click on it, I get it. Now, I suspect some of you that are on 2013 and 2016, when you go and do that, you will not see the Inquire button. And I think this is the first time in all of the sessions I've done whether the version of Excel that you are using matters. Inquire is only available on Plus Professional and the Plus of Excel and the Plus Professional of Office 365. So, without further ado, let's take a look at what I've got here. Fairly complicated spreadsheet. It's got a bunch of stores, and I want to know information not about answers are, but how the answers are collected. And that's the fundamental raison d'etre to Inquire. So I'm going to click on the tab. And over here, you'll notice Workbook Analysis. And I'm going to click on it. And when I bring this down, you're going to see a window. And here's what it's going to analyze. It's going to give me a summary, and it's going to check for certain pieces or types of data. And you'll notice that I have not checked any with a 0. So it's telling me that there's 6 visible sheets, there's 4 hidden sheets, there's 826 formulas, etc., etc. Well, that's fine. So let's do the Excel export. And I'm going to save it, replace. And now notice down here, I clicked on Excel export to save it, but now I want to load that export file. So I click. And I get a whole bunch of sheets, starting with the summary sheet, creation date, modified date, a whole bunch of summary data, and it goes on and on and on. How about visible sheets? Well, there are 6. How about hidden sheets? There are 4. Give me a list of all the formulas in the 10 sheets. So it tells me what sheet they're on, it tells me the cell address, and it gives me the formula, and it gives me the value currently. But let's break it down. Let's look at numeric formulas. Let's look at textual formulas. Let's look at constants. Let's look at nested if statements. Let's look at no cell references. There aren't any. Let's look at all blank cells. How about hidden cells? And so on. So there's an amazing amount of detail here. And if we go back to my original file, like this, let's look at the worksheet relationships. And this gives me a graphical image when I bring it down, because it's showing right now on my other screen. So there we go. And if I click on the plus signs, it'll drill down. So let's stop and reflect. How often does Ellen use Inquire? Well, never on most of the simple tracking worksheets that I'm doing. But as many of you know, we have just finished the 2019 survey, and I thank all of you who took the time to do it. And that starts out as a very complicated Excel spreadsheet where I dump in the data from SurveyMonkey. It consists of 166 sheets, and keeping track of those, it's not a monster, but it's a challenge. And from time to time, I will use Inquire for that. Now I have a question for all of you. How often or have you ever had two files that you thought were the same? And turns out that they weren't. So using Inquire, I have this file that is Inquire 2A, and it's a tracking spreadsheet. And I also have a similar one called 2B. Now, it's a challenge to compare cells to cells, but not when you use Inquire. I got 2A and there's 2B. Okay? So I'm defining the files. They need to be open, and I go compare. And I get this monster. So here's B, and here's A. And notice what it does. It color codes the files. So the green ones here is where data has been entered. The purple, formulas, and so on. And then down here, it compares the cell values. Well, rather than take the time to go through everything, I'm going to go down to the bottom here on both of these and draw your attention to that number there in B. But in A, it's that number in B there. So I now know that the files are not totally identical. And now I go down here and see where the differences are. So again, I'm not going to use Inquire very often, but when I do, it's hugely useful. So let's move on. What I want to do here is spend about probably 8 or 9 minutes on some tips to working with text and working with dates, because we all go through that. And I have information about what I'm doing here in the little handout, and then you have access to this file. So here, I want to determine whether that and that are equal. And the way I do that is to say equal A equal 4 equal B4. But now watch what happens if I take off the N and hit enter. So on. And I don't use that a lot, but I do. And then we have this I do sometimes. We have this situation. They are identical, but the case is different. And if I do equal A7 equal B7, it says it's true because they are identical, just the case difference. Now, if I want an exact comparison, then I need to use the exact function in Excel. Equal exact, what am I comparing? A10 to B10, and they are not exact. And then this one, at first blush, looks exactly the same, but it's reading false when I do A13 equal B13. And the secret to that is when I compare this, notice where my insertion point is at the end of the A. Notice where it is here at the end. Do you see the space in there? Well, Excel is smart enough or dumb enough to say they're not exact. And I'll show you how you deal with that in a minute. And I suspect most of you know the next couple of things that I'm going to do, so I'll do them quickly. If I need to join 2 or more cells, I use the ampersand. A16, ampersand B16. But when I do that, the 2 run together. So I got smarter after a while, and I used 2 ampersands. A19, ampersand quote space quote, ampersand B19, and that of course puts a space in there. If I want to do what I usually do, and that's do a comma, Then in the quotes, I do quote, comma, space, quote. Now, let's look at this. So you notice up here, there's two spaces. And remember the space that I had at the end in the previous one? Well, the way we deal with that is to use equal trim A26. And what that does is clean out any spaces except between words or any unprintable characters. So notice trim A26 and it's perfect. Now in advanced work, and I'm using this not a lot, but a fair bit in my survey, I need to know the length of something. So what is the length of September sales, including the space? It's 15, and I use equal LAN bracket A29. Changing the text, there's 4 ways to do that. Number one, if I want to change this from all uppercase to what we call proper, which means the first letter of each word will be capitalized and the rest won't, I use equal proper A32. And then I can pull stuff out. It's called extracting characters from a string. So in this one, I'm saying go to the end in A35 and count back 11 spaces, and that gives me Canada Inc. Or I can start at the beginning and say equal left A36 and count forward 11, and I get K2e Canada. And then finally, if I want to pull something out of the middle, like just Canada, I use the mid function. So this says take A37, count 5 spaces, start there, count 6 spaces, and give me the text for those 6 spaces. And finally, many of you, I suspect, are using the technique of find and select and make the change there. However, there's a neat little known function in Excel called equal substitute. I want to change it from budget 2014 to budget 2015. So in here, I say equal substitute, what's in A40, comma, then what I want to change, comma, what I want it to be. So there's an overview of some text functions. Let's move on to dates now. Right here. All right, you'll notice up here that it says March the 15th. Why? Because I'm using equal today bracket bracket. And that displays the current date. Now, if I want to translate that into text, it's a little more complicated. So in defining this, what I'm saying is print what's between the brackets. So that'll be today is blank. Now dates, going back to a session that I did last year, underneath it is basically a number with the date number 1 starting at January the 1st, 1900. And what we're trying to do here is combine text with a number, and you can't do that. So what I'm doing here is saying, and then join the conversion of that number to text, print the full day, print the full month, print the day, and print the year. And I get Tuesday is March. Today is Tuesday, March the 5th, 2019. Now, sometimes, particularly when we're doing dumps from accounting programs, we'll get the date in 3 columns. We'll get the year, we'll get the month, and we'll get the day. But I want that. So there's a neat function called equal date, and then define the columns B9, C9, and D9. And then we get into what I call date arithmetic. So I want to generate a set of dates separated by a week. So I've got 2015 04 04, and I want 2015 11. And it's pretty simple. It's E16 plus 7. And then a neat one, and I'm going to come back to that with a different function in about 2 minutes, is how do you do it separated by a month? Well, this time you say equal date bracket, give me the year in E19, give me the month in E19, add one to the month, and give me the date. And we get that. Separated by a year, the only difference is this time I say equal date to the year in E22 plus 1, which adds 1 to the year, and then the month. Calculating the difference between two dates, it's just a straight subtraction. So the number of days between that and that is 118. And then finally, we have a function called net work days. And all that does is does a calculation on the days between Monday and Friday. It ignores weekends. And if you build the calendar, it'll ignore holidays. So network days between D32 and C32, we get 36. Then finally, calculating the years is pretty simple. Equal year in C34 minus year in D34. So that's the highlights of the major date functions that I use. And I want to go on and do another date function that is useful. And that is the question that I asked you in the first poll. And that's the function called end of month. So you notice up here, well, let's start here. Print for the 6 months ended, then convert the date to text in H4, which is that, and give me the month, the day, and the year. But if we go down here, I'm using a different function, and you'll notice what it says. EO month H4, comma 0. So that's going to give me the data down here for April 30th, 2018. But I can then copy that formula and notice for March what it is. Same thing, but this time minus 1. So get the end of the month date for the previous month, which is March 31st. And the same thing here. And then down here, I'm doing some fairly complicated SUMFS, and that's not the focus of today. That'll be a focus on a coming Excel Guru session. So end of month, highly useful, particularly in terms of budgeting, etc. And then I want to wrap today with another function that is just in Excel 2016, and it's available to all of you. So all I've got here is a table with sales data. And I want to do a forecast. And there's a couple of ways of doing this. And you notice down that I can use equal forecast to calculate that. But instead of that, I'm going to go with a tool that's available in Excel 2016 called Data Forecast Sheet. Create a new worksheet to predict data trends. Okay. So if we look at this, and I can make it, can I make it bigger? No, I can't, but I can do create. So there's the existing data, and there's the forecast. Now you notice there's actually three forecasts: upper confidence level, lower confidence level. And I click on create. And there's the same chart, but watch what happens when I go down here to where they created the forecast. So I'm forecasting on the basis of this data to March, April, May, June, and to November. This is the forecast. So this is what Excel thinks it's going to do. This is the margin of error, or what is called the lower confidence. And this is the higher confidence. And there's a complex formula that you can use to summarize that. And I use that. 2,075 of you answered my survey. So I need to know what the confidence level is that the data is giving me an accurate projections of the responses from accountants and bookkeepers. So I use forecast for that. And it comes up with, you've got a 95% certainty rate 3 times out of 5, et cetera, et cetera. So Marilyn, on that note, I'm done, and we need to use the next poll, looking ahead in 2 weeks' time.
Great job as always, Alan. So in 2 weeks' time, folks, we'll be doing a webinar focused on macros. We'd like to get a sense of your confidence with that. You can have multiple selections. Do you have the developer tab in your ribbon? Have you ever recorded a macro? Do you have a personal macro workbook? Or maybe none of the above? And our session will be just great for you. Lots of learning. Everybody's quick off the mark today, Alan. We're already at 90%, so I'm going to count you down, folks, from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to close the polls and share the results.
Well, I hope to impress 46% of you. And for those of you that have recorded a macro, I think I will add something to your learning, including where your personal macro workbook is. So Marilyn, it's time for me to sign off for a bit. So let's do a handoff to my good friend, Andrew Bates.
That was interesting. I learned some things, as always. There's always a ton of stuff to learn in Excel. Like all software development companies, Microsoft keeps their programmers employed, and their programmers come up with new and cool ways to do stuff. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Adagio Financial Reporter. I think that I'm going to start with a poll because it's always useful to start for a poll. But before we get there, many of you may not know, may not have heard of Adagio. And so I thought I'd just let you know where Adagio fits in the accounting software space, because of course it's accounting, and they're not all the same. In fact, I've been at a lunch where everyone around the table had paid over $6 million for their accounts receivable. So people spend a lot more than what Adagio costs. But if you're used to selling and supporting or helping or assisting with Sage 50 or QuickBooks, then Adagio can look like an expensive solution for people. But time is money, as you know. So if your accounting software can save you a bunch of time, then it can be a very good investment. And one of the places where accounting departments are asked to spend a lot of time is in the generation of financial statements for different stakeholders. So Adagio's multi-user, multi-currency, modular, separate module. You can see we have lots of modules too, with specialized solutions for wholesale distribution and job costing and all that kind of stuff. We're designed for an organization that's spending somewhere or has an income of somewhere between 2 and 100 million in revenue, we have a specific soft spot for First Nations and not-for-profits. They represent over 35% of our installed base, and we have over the course of the 20 or so years we've been shipping Adagio, we have done some changes to the software specifically for them. We expect our clients to have a full-time accounting department or person, and in all honesty, only a third of the Adagio sites have only one person in the accounting department, because if it's just you in the accounting, you can make any software work in any organization as long as you can deal with the transaction volume. The challenge comes when you hire your first staff person and you can no longer watch how data is being entered. And sometimes the first time you realize that you have a problem with the way transactions have been entered is when you print out a financial statement and you're looking at it and you say, oh, that number cannot possibly be right, and then the big search begins to figure out what's gone wrong. And if you haven't entered the data yourself, that can be quite a search and quite involved. Our other attribute of our clients is they have no IT department. They may have an IT guy. Our larger sites have IT guys, but often all of their IT infrastructure support is outsourced, sometimes to a small technology company, sometimes to a larger company. But Adagio has a very light IT footprint. You don't need to be a SQL expert in order to install it and keep it running. It's pretty self-contained. You don't have to worry about new versions of Microsoft Office breaking it, for example. And all of our, all of our clients do reports. And perhaps most interestingly, they all do financial statements every month, and they look at those financial statements, and many of them use their financial statements in order to provide operational statements to department managers and people who are managing budgets and comparatives with the prior year. And you all know, because you're all in the accounting space, that operational statements look dramatically different from the statements that you provide to Revenue Canada or to the bank. Not in terms of the overall number, but in terms of the analysis that you can do off those financial statements. Because generally, when you're doing your statements for the bank, you show them just the highest level view of the organization. Same is true with Revenue Canada, of course. I'll just give you just a little background of the general ledger. So we believe in account numbers, both customer numbers and vendor numbers, and GL account numbers. So we have a chart of account. It's completely user-defined with a 6-character account number and a 6-character department. You can have as many departments as you wish. Unlike some of like the entry-level products, a department can exist for one account and not another, which saves a lot of data entry errors. So you can choose whether this particular department has an account called office expense or rent or any other major account heading that's important to you. The financial statement layout is completely independent of the chart of accounts. You'll know that any entry-level products, when you add an account to the general ledger, you say where on the financial statement that account is to be displayed. And they simplify your life quite significantly by giving you predefined formats of what your financial statements are supposed to look like, and they make you decide in what section of the particular financial statements an account is meant to exist. And if you want it somewhere else, well, that's too bad. I have heard more times than I care to mention people saying, well, if you need a financial statement that looks like that, then just put the trial balance in Excel and you can do it all in Excel. And the problem with that comment, as accurate as it may be, is that means that you are spending an enormous amount of time every month in Excel. And their quality of life should be an issue in the accounting department. We support 12 or 13 fiscal periods, and we have a separate bucket for the year-end adjustments that you get from your accounting firm or accountant at the end of the year, so that your year-end adjustments do not distort the final period's operating statement. So you can have, and 13 fiscal periods for the retail space. And you notice I'm talking about fiscal periods because one of the things that differentiates Adagio is that a transaction can be posted to a fiscal period which differs from the date of the transaction. Now, in the majority of cases, the date of the transaction determines the fiscal period that it should be posted to. But for things like revenue recognition or prepaid expenses or deferred expenses, things like that, then you don't want, it's quite reasonable to post revenue or expenses to a different period. And the general ledger in Adagio is completely fiscal period based. We have lots of controls to prevent people from posting to the wrong account. You can mark an account inactive to prevent people posting to it. You can close specific periods in your GL to prevent people from posting to them. And any transactions that try and post to the closed period, will be dropped into an error batch so that the error can be investigated. You can say on an account-by-account basis which subledger is allowed to post to the account to prevent people from inadvertently choosing that account in a journal entry. We support budgets, of course. I mentioned the not-for-profit focus of our user base. Of course, they're managing against budget. We had a lot of debate about how many budget buckets you need in a general ledger, and we saw a lot of different ones, like even 99 different budget buckets. And the problem with 99 budget buckets is that now the accounting department has a different problem, which is which budgets should I actually be showing on the financial statement. So we decided that we would just have two. One for the budgets that you prepare at the beginning of the year, that everyone signs off on, and then a second set of figures that you could adjust throughout the year as reality takes hold. Once the budgets are approved, you can just lock them to prevent people from changing them inadvertently, so you don't have to set up security or things like that around budgets. You should know, of course, that we have a full security model to say only these people can be in the GL, or these people, when they're in the GL, can only do these particular things. When you copy, when you're creating your New Year's budgets, you can copy the prior year to save yourself a ton of data entry, or you can zero them out if you're doing zero-based budgets. And budget figures can be imported. They can be rewritten from the financial reporter, so you can have a complex financial statement that calculates what your next year budget is going to be on an account-by-account basis or account department basis. Departments can have their own budgets. And the budgets are on a period-by-period basis. So you can have budgets where a department has no budget in the first 3 periods in the fiscal year, and then 2/3 of their budget in the second quarter, and 1/3 of the budget in the third quarter, and no budget in the final quarter, so that they can actually match revenues or expenses to the time when they're meant to arrive. Optional unlimited departments. So you can have as many departments as you want in the GL. I think the largest one I've seen is 450 departments. As I mentioned before, departments can have their own budget. You can close a department to its own individual retained earnings account, and you can close it whenever you feel like it. You can mark an entire department inactive if you don't need it anymore. So lots of flexibility there. So let's see, other things. Oh, the year-end, so soft year-end, kind of soft. We still have a year-end process and close the year so that there is a final demarcation when you hand the books over to the accounting professional. But you can open next year's budgets without opening next year, so you don't have to worry about people posting into the new year just because you're beginning to enter your budget figures. Full financial reporting when you open your new year, but before you've closed it. So in the 1 to 2 months that you may have be moving into the next year and you're waiting for vendors to get their invoices out, you can still do a full set of financial statements. And once you've closed that period, when you get the adjusting journal entries, if you're posting to the prior year, we allow you to post to a year-end adjustment figure. Today, I was going to talk about the financial reporter. So it's a full spreadsheet. So if you have Excel expertise, not tons of expertise, but some Excel expertise in writing a formula, this will stand you in very good stead when you're working in the Adagio financial reporter. One of the nice things, since it's part of the general ledger, is within the financial reporter itself, you can drill down to the transaction level, and all the way down to the balance journal entry, and I'll show you that. And there's a departmental security model so that you can say this person can only see these departments when they're in the financial reporter, to allow departmental managers to see just the financial statements that occur to them. So let's bring up the general ledger, and I'm in the GL. I'm signed in as user sys. You'll see, so here I'm looking at the chart of accounts with their balances as at a particular date with budgets and forecasts. When everything in Adagio is chosen off a grid, in almost all the grids that you'll see on any of our forms, you'll see a little Excel Direct button, and it has the Excel 2003 logo, although it works with all versions of Excel. And whatever grid you're looking at, you can click on the Excel button, and we will open Excel. And once the computer wakes up, we'll open Excel, and we'll drop whatever grid you're. Yes, well, it opened on the wrong screen because I'm in a two-screen universe, and whatever grid you're looking at will be dropped into Excel. And you'll notice it's dropped in as a table, and there's a big benefit in that. You can do pivot charts and filtering, so I can see just the income statement accounts if I want, and the totals are at the bottom of the table so that I can do any math. Many of you will have had the exciting task of exporting a report from your accounting system and then spending an hour and a half cleaning up the report. I'll just bring up a financial statement here. So you'll see it looks a lot like Excel, rows and columns, and the toolbar button across the top will be mostly familiar tools. The one tool that will be a little bit different from what you're used to is this one, where you choose the fiscal period that you want. Oops, I'm sorry about that. Okay. Let's go back to the financial reporter. You choose the fiscal period that you want the financial statement for, and if I choose a different fiscal period, the numbers all change and the titles change, and and you can have as many different years here as possible. This is a very simple financial statement. It shows two columns and very simple. Now you may think like it's very simple. If I click the down arrow button here, I get all the accounts in a particular range. So if I wanted to see all the separate revenue accounts, I just put the word range here in the first column, and then when I click the expand button, I'll see all the individual revenue accounts in the range. Because financial statements are unique in that you have to you have to sum an arbitrary range of accounts. So if I wanted to separate this row into two rows, I want not just all the revenue, which is all the accounts from 4,000 to 49.99. I want product revenue and service revenue on different rows. So in order to make that change, I'll duplicate the row. I'll edit the first cell to say product revenue. I'll edit the second one so it says service revenue, and then this sum here has to be changed. And it's not quite the same as Excel. You'll notice that I click on the cell where I want the formula. I click on the sum. I highlight the cells that I want added together, and then I click on the sum button again, and the appropriate formula is put in place. If I wanted, I could copy this formula, which up at the top you can see is E19 plus E20. I can copy that and paste it adjacently, and it'll adjust the cell references just as it would in Excel. So as I like to say, all the computational horsepower of Excel and most of its formatting, as you can see, is bold and underlined and all that kind of stuff is available. So all of its computational power, most of its formatting. So you make your financial statements look however you would like them to look. So here we have two rows, product revenue and service revenue. Now I have to change my accounts here, so I'll clear this range and bring up my chart of accounts and open my income accounts. So here's my chart of accounts with every account from my GL in the income section. That's the only, you have to tell the Adagio General Ledger whether this is a balance sheet account or an income account. But the actual account number that you use can be whatever suits your particular coding method. So I'm going to take all the product revenue. So revenues for consulting, we'll call that a service revenue. And I'm just picking up the account and dropping it. And if I pick up the next account and drop it, you'll see that it has picked up all accounts from 4,000 to 4010. And the fact that there's a range in there means that if I add account number 4005, it'll automatically be summed into this row. So next we have product sales. I can use shift-click to select a whole set of accounts. And then I have a database repair revenue. That's a very odd one. Oops, I dropped it in the wrong place. I'll pick up database repair revenue over here and drop it there. Now, here's an example where on the general ledger, I need this total to be the sum of all accounts from 4,000 to 4010 plus account 4,500. And if you look closely, you'll see there's a little comma in there. And then sales discounts, I can pick up all the, that's more product revenue. And when I expand my sheet, you'll see that I see all the individual entries. If I want my product revenue to stay summarized into a single row, then I just get rid of dot range. It's still summing all the accounts from 4,100 to 4,240 plus 4,800 to 4,940. It's still summing those specific accounts in the total here. But when I click on the expand button, this row does not expand. It stays as a summary row. So you can summarize or detail whatever accounts that you would like in a particular range. Now, in doing that, you might have noticed, well, if you were looking closely, this number for the total isn't right. So often when you're building a financial statement and you have a complex chart of accounts or a large chart of accounts, it can be difficult to make sure that you've picked up all the various accounts. So within the financial reporter, you can right mouse click and say, show me all the accounts that are included on this financial statement. So here's all the accounts. I've missed freight revenue. So freight revenue, I'll consider that a service. I just collapsed the sheet here. I'll consider that a service, and I'll add that to the service revenue. And now when I check the accounts, you'll see all my accounts are picked up. And because this is an income statement, there's none of the balance sheet accounts are referenced on this particular statement. So let's see. If I wanted to add a column, this is a very simple two-column current period and year-to-date, and I'm showing it for fiscal period 10, and I'm showing it consolidated for all the departments. Now, if I wanted to show it for a single department, I can just choose that department from the drop-down list, and you'll notice that we support department ranges, so all accounts from 100 to 150, that's the United States, or 200 to 250 is Canada, or all accounts from that end in 00, they're on the East Coast, and all the accounts that end in 50 are on the West Coast. And whenever I choose one of those drop downs, that not only does the title change, but all of the numbers change as appropriate. I can even say, view departments, I can even say, I would like to create a list of Bob's departments. And Bob is responsible for 100, 150, and 250. Okay, so now here's summarized just 100, 150, and 250, and that's Bob's department. So I can easily create operational departments for managers, and I don't have to worry if the ministry that I'm reporting to reorganizes its geography so that my carefully structured departmental groups no longer apply. If I want to add a column, someone comes to me and says, well, could you put the budget for the year here? I'll duplicate this column and I'll add the budget for the year here, and the title changes and all the numbers change, and if I expand the sheet, I've got all the individual budgets and budget amounts. Of course, if someone was looking at that, they'd say, oh, that looks like the whole year's budget. I would like this to be budget year to date, so we'll make this budget year to date. And I'll format this cell so that the alignment, the text wraps, and it's centered in the top and middle. Okay, budget year to date. What other things can I see? Can I show you here? Oh yes, if you're if you're looking at a particular number. So one of the challenges when you do your financial statements at the end of the month is you look at a number and you say, that number cannot possibly be right. So we'll look here, I'm just looking through this office expenses. I'll double click on this number, and the financial reporter will show me all the accounts and departments that summed to get to $44,239.24. And so this is all the accounts and departments because I'm printing this consolidated over here. If I double click on a particular account department, I can see what's being posted throughout the fiscal periods that I'm reporting on. I can double click on a particular period. I can see the amounts for that period that were posted. And if I double click on a particular transaction, I can see the balance journal entry, all the debits and credits that went into that particular transaction. And you may have noticed over here on the right that there's a view button here. And if I'm curious to see what the source document was of that transaction, I can click on the view button and it will show me the transaction that was attached in accounts payable when that transaction was posted. So here we have a poll question for you. The poll question that I would like to ask is, have you ever needed to see a source document when you have been working within the financial reporter? So we'll just give people a few minutes to vote. So one of the things here that I know you can always go to the filing cabinet to go and get those documents, but one of the nicest things here is that I didn't have to go to the filing cabinet to look at that document. The filing cabinet is off in the accounting office. I work in a different office, and I can go and look at the source document and see the American Express bill, for example, or the Visa statement, or some notes, the comments that were written on the document. I can look at that while I'm looking at the financial statement, so I can do that. The other thing is that I'm only showing you one of my screens. Normally, this panel with the forms in it would be on a second monitor, so I can look at documents while I'm going through the financial statement. So, okay, and I've got it always on top, so I need to get it out of the way. If I wanted to just see the financial statements, all the transactions that got me to the office expense of $44,000, I can ask to see the transaction details. It will show me all of the documents. It'll show me all of the transactions across all of the GL accounts and departments and fiscal period that get me to that total on the financial statement, $44,000. You'll notice that there's a view button over here that allows me to view the individual documents that were attached. And by the way, if I was looking at a credit to bank because I'd written a check, I could see the remittance advice for the check, with all of the invoices that it was paying automatically attached to that remittance advice. So I could click on the credit to the bank, drill down, see the individual check that was written, see the remittance advice for the check, and also see all the individual invoices that were paid with that check automatically in the view panel. There would be arrows here to leaf through all the documents. We automatically attach all the related documents together and flow them through the entire accounting system. So I can look at a deposit to bank, I can see a scanned image of the check that was taken, and I can see all the invoices that we applied that check to. You'll notice that there is an Excel Direct button on this grid. I can take this grid and drop the transactions into Excel. You notice that Excel also gets a View button, and the View button automatically hyperlinks to the document itself so that the person who's looking at the Excel spreadsheet can also see the documents that were attached. So imagine if you're an auditor and you want to see what those transactions are. And when we pulled all of those documents out of the filing cabinet, they're all in a filing cabinet called Doc Storage. When we pulled those documents out of the filing cabinet, we automatically put them in a folder called given the name of the sheet that we created, and we divided them into documents that came from accounts payable and documents that were attached in the general ledger. And under vendors, we created a folder for every single vendor that was pulled out of the filing cabinet, giving the vendor name and the vendor number and what the document type was and the document itself. So even someone who doesn't have access to the spreadsheet, or you just want to take a USB key and hand this to an auditor, you can just zip up the spreadsheet and the associated Excel Direct folder, and the auditor can see all of the transactions that were posted to a particular account and the underlying source transactions that went into that. I have another poll because one of the questions about all of this is whether you find yourself having to go to Excel in order to produce spreadsheets. So let's see. I wonder, do I have another poll here. I'm having a little trouble with my
You have 2 more polls left, Andrew. One is about, do you ever need to use Excel?
Okay, this is the one I want to launch. Is, have you ever had to go to Excel in order to produce financial statements, either for one of the stakeholders in the organization, whether it's the owners or the funding agencies or different funding agencies or the bank or managers or operational? Have you ever had to go to Excel? So we'll just take a look at how that, let's see, we're just coming up, almost got votes from the people who are still online. And okay, so I'll share these responses. I realized that I forgot to share the previous responses, so I'll share these just so that you can see. So some people are very happy with the financial reporting that they're getting from their current solution. Others are always having to go to Excel, and that's one of the things is your statements are produced every month. It means you're dropping into Excel every single month, and that can be tedious. And one of the things that's a risk is that someone goes and adds a general ledger account on you, and all of a sudden your financial statements are broken, and you have to bring them back. Okay, so let's see. What else do I want to show you in the financial reporter? I have 1 minute. So maybe I'll just quickly scan the questions. Oh, someone asked whether you could do a rolling 12-month comparative. The answer to that is quite easily. You can do. You can also do things like budget forecast. I'll bring up this one. So an interesting one for people who are in the not-for-profit space is here's 12 months. If I'm in period 3, I have 3 periods of actuals and 9 periods of budget, so I can see whether how I'm doing. And as I print this out at the end of every period, the statement automatically replaces the budgets with the actuals, so that a departmental manager can see what's happening. So there's just ticked over to 10 o'clock. I have one last poll that I'm kind of always curious about, because the doc store, the attachment of documents, is unique within Adagio. The fact that we auto attach all documents that we generate. So if you print an invoice in Adagio, it's automatically attached to the transaction. Print a purchase order, that's attached to the vendor. Print a credit note or an order confirmation, all the documents are automatically attached, and the ones you scan automatically get joined with the documents that you've attached. So the final end of season question is, would you remotely consider changing your accounting to get access to some of the functionality that you've seen here? The reason that I asked that question is, in my experience of 35 years, of almost 40 years now of doing this, no one wakes up on a Saturday and says, oh, I need new accounting software. It's not something that organizations undertake lightly. But if you have to deal with auditors and you have continuous requests for source documents out of the filing cabinet, and your audit is a major source of trauma the fact that these documents can be automatically attached. You notice I haven't said the word paperless here in once because you do not have to go paperless in order to use this functionality. You can continue to use your same paper that's swirling through the organization, but if you attach them in the accounting department, you hardly ever have to go to the filing cabinet again. So with that, Marilyn, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you very much. I will share the poll just so that you can see lots of people say it's not applicable because you're in public practice, you don't have access to those, and a lot of people don't need access to the source documents when they're looking at financial statements. So I'll turn over the con to you, Marilyn, and thanks everyone for paying attention to me for this last half hour.
Thanks, Andrew. Alan, I've made you the presenter.
And here I am. So before we go, for those of you who are not millennials, and particularly you, Andrew, I have a smile for you. And that is that 2 of the respondents to the survey indicated that they were still using ACPAC Plus. There will be some smiles. And on that note, I want to move on and do a wrap. Before I do that, though, I want to show you a website where you can pick up more tips and tricks. This is a paid webinar, and you will get this information when Marilyn sends you the package of materials. So on that note, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Marilyn. Thank you to all of our attendees. It's a wrap.